Okay, welcome back, folks, to our second debate in a series of debates we're doing for the 7 out of 12, 7 upcoming assembly races. Today we're joined by Karen Bronga and Leigh Sloan from District 5, Seat H, East Anchorage. This is a 2-year seat because Forrest Dunbar went to the Senate. So earlier we heard from George Martinez and Spencer Moore, but this is the 2-year seat in East Anchorage. I want to thank our sponsors, first of all, GCI, the IBW Local 1547, and of course the Alaska Political Report. We're going to have a 2-minute opening statement from the candidates. We're going to talk about some issues affecting Anchorage. We'll have a candidate question Q&A period. We'll conclude with some more questions, some more topics, and then we'll do a closing statement. So we drew at random, and Leigh Sloan, you're up first for the opening statement.
Okay, hi, I'm Leigh Sloan. I've lived here 15 years in Alaska, about 10 in Anchorage. I'm an educator. I teach both children and adults. I was a public school educator majoring in gifted education, and then I moved here from Missouri several years ago. I've been homeschooling my kids ever since, and now my kids are in middle school and high school, and I actually started a small group school. It's a hybrid homeschool over in East Anchorage, right across from ASD. And so I have a great interest in education. I'm for educational freedom and for the ability for parents to choose those choices for their kids. I've had a podcast called Brave Nation. We used to call it Brave Conversations, and we actually had people come together in the community all over in Anchorage, in different pockets in Anchorage. And we actually had these conversations. And my goal with those was to bring people together to the table that had disparate beliefs and viewpoints. And I thought that it would be really healthy if we would learn to discuss together and come to some solutions and just, get our feet wet and not be behind a keyboard, not be, in all the artificial ways that we argue today. And we really had some great conversations. Even George Martinez was a part of one of those. And so, I've just been cultivating community for the whole time we've been here. We've been involved in several different projects. I helped with Stephanie Taylor's campaign. And here I'm in District 5. I was not originally in District 5, but now I am, and we're still looking to that same seat that Forrest Dunbar left behind. I am for economic freedom, educational freedom, and the freedom to speak your mind here in Anchorage, and I hope that I can help honor your voice here in Anchorage. I feel like the people of Eastside are not always listened to. They're not always fully engaged, and I feel like I can bring some nuance and some balance to our current assembly. So appreciate you having me.
Thank you, Leigh. Appreciate that. Karen Bronga?
My name's Karen Bronga, and I am running for Assembly District 5, Seat H. I grew up here in Anchorage on the east side. I've been married for 35 years, but to step back, I am a product of all the public schools on the east side. I went to Wonder Park, Willowa, Clark, and East. I married my husband nearly 35 years ago. We have 3 amazing kids, 2 of which attended UAA, and surprise, surprise, they're still in Anchorage living and working, which is why we need strong universities. I am a community advocate, trails advocate, and outdoor enthusiast. And I've been a community council officer for Scenic Foothills for the past 10 years. The reason I chose to run is my love for Anchorage and my special passion for the East Side. And pride. My campaign has been asking me, where does this come from? And, I just think it's like the scrappy underdog feeling that we have worked so hard for what we have. I've had a front row seat to watching Anchorage grow and change, and I want to be there for the next chapter. My time on community council and teaching has taught me to listen well to others, to follow the public process, and to collaborate with others. I'm going to work to make our neighborhoods safer, my community members healthy, and to improve the quality of life for all of us in Anchorage so that we can attract and retain new people to the city. And I think that's about it.
Thank you, Karen. Appreciate that. And Leigh, we'll get right into it. I'll start with you, Karen. We had a historic snowfall in December. I've been here, almost 20 years, and it snowed a lot. But the response to the snow plowing on the city roads, and there's state roads as well, but the city roads, we saw schools closed for like 10 days, big economic impact for businesses. Many of the roads are still only partially plowed. Mm-hmm. We have 2-lane roads, which are really a lane and a half. So about snow plowing, why do you think this has happened, and what can we do better? And living in a subarctic city, I think it's, one of the crucial roles of government to be able to at least plow our roads in the winter.
Absolutely. I have been going to the doors. I've been making it to about 325 doors a week. Universally, the number one problem when I ask what's the biggest thing that's bothering you right now, it's snow removal. And I'm hearing comments like, this is a winter city, for heaven's sakes. We can do better, recognizing that it was an abnormally large amount of snow, but also maintaining your equipment, paying your drivers a wage that keeps them driving for the city. And so that's some pre-planning, like maintaining the equipment. But the other thing is, I've become aware that this could have been declared a disaster or an emergency, which could have accessed different funds that could have put more plows out on the street. And so I really think that we could have done better in that situation. It's just thinking outside the box. If it was an emergency situation, school district personnel bus drivers that weren't driving school bus that day possibly could have, they have a license to drive heavy equipment, they could have been helping. I just think in this situation, we could figure out how to think outside the box. My husband was actually out snow blowing our street, and we were lucky to be in an area where people did own snow blowers and were opening the routes for people, but it's tough.
Yeah, Leigh, on the snow plowing situation.
Yeah. Well, as you know, we had record snowfall, and I just want to thank all of those people who were out there working to solve the problem. I know that I dug into this a little bit because I wanted to find out what's the real issue here, and I think that there was some negotiations happening that weren't really coming together as far as what the workers were going to get paid and all of that. So it sounds like some communication issues were happening there that may need to be resolved for the future. But I think, with the record snow dump, we can always look at better, more efficient ways to do things. And what I was noticing was a lot of the cars in our area weren't moved in time to get the snow out of the way, and that was pretty annoying.
This was a big problem. I mean, we had several on our public street, and I even called it in because the snow was being put around the cars, and it was getting almost into the road.
Yeah, It's really dangerous, and I think people can't even hardly see above the berms. And so, where to put all that snow, those are things we can look at for the future, because we could have another dump like this, and we need to be prepared in such a snowy city.
I want to talk about housing a little bit, but specifically the Holton Hills. There was a housing development proposed in Girdwood a couple of years ago. The Heritage Land Bank proposed discharging some land and building some houses, and some folks in Girdwood got pretty upset. And recently the Assembly voted to end that, basically Holton Hills development. So I want to ask about that specifically, but also the message that sends in Anchorage, where AHFC has said we need to build 25,000 new housing units by 2026, and last year we did something like less than 500. So I want to ask you about, I'll start with you, Leigh, about housing in general, and about maybe the message ending this housing project in Girdwood sends.
I think it's unfortunate that, there wasn't, I think it comes down to communication. There wasn't better communication with the people of Girdwood. And also, I think, it seems like everybody kind of says not in my backyard. And we're going to have this somewhere. We're going to have spaces, for more places for people to be. And so I just think we need better relationships with our community, and to understand the issues, and to ask for solutions, not demand them. And so, I think I would have voted differently than the Assembly on that. I think I would have wanted to push that conversation a little bit more, because I think that time is of the essence. We need to start something.
Karen, so on Holton Hills, but then also just housing in general in Anchorage.
Housing in general, it's the high cost of housing is directly reflected in the high cost of rentals, and the
average
lack
house
of
is
rentals.
almost $500,000 in Anchorage.
It's amazing, and the solutions are far off. But I think that I'm no city planner, but walking around my districts, I'm seeing some houses that are really crumbling. They're old, and I think thinking outside the box, some of those housing units we may end up actually bringing down and making a larger housing unit that has a rental with it. I think there was progress to add the accessory dwelling units, the possibility of expanding rentals that way. As far as, I just absolutely don't have a great solution, but I think some of the rentals are just not attractive and not safe, and that's causing a problem too. And we need to do something about that. Holton Hills, I think it did turn into a not in my backyard thing, and I know that they were rallied and frothing and going to every community council and trying to get it stopped. But I do feel like the disarray of our city government right now made it really dangerous to put this limited resource of land in the hands of our city until it's moving forward in a cooperative way. Right now, I just wasn't sure. The public process hasn't been followed well enough to have trust that it was going to be developed properly.
I want to move on to, there's, like I said, there's 7 assembly races, 2 of which have incumbents, Christopher Constant and Felix Rivera running. The other 5, including your race, it's non-incumbents. Either people have gone to the legislature or been termed out. So I'll start with you, Karen. If you were to be elected with at least 5 new people on the assembly, which is almost half, how would you navigate kind of being in a body where they've lost quite a bit of institutional knowledge?
Well, I'm a learner, teacher first, but actually learner first, teacher second. And it's all about, through my community council work, listening to neighbors, talking to elected officials, bringing neighbor concerns. So I've had a lot of practice at that process of working through government issues. I think, we're really going to have a huge learning curve. I've been doing my best by, tour the Sullivan Arena. I've been to almost every assembly meeting. I've been to every community council several times that I would possibly be going to as an assembly person. It's just out to see the port. So it's going to be a lot of homework, no question about it. And I'm excited to work on both sides of the aisle to see how we can hit the ground running, because we need to get running.
Leigh, same question. If you were to win, navigating an assembly with a lot of new people.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually really looking forward to it, because I feel like the environment right now is very toxic, and I feel like it's tied to a lot of the things in the past. And so I feel like having more fresh blood, I guess, on the assembly will help that process, become more. I've already seen the new people stepping in, and I feel like they're kind of, connecting better with each other and communicating better. And so I feel like we do need a great turnover, and I'm excited to, hopefully get to work with those new people, and maybe some of the old bad vibes will go to the side.
Well, it's kind of my next question. It's almost a good sequitur. Yeah. I want to talk about I'll start with you, Karen, the relationship with the mayor, whether it's the assembly's relationship with the mayor, whether over the mask mandate or some of these contentious veto overrides. They have the kind of supermajority. They've had it since he was elected. And just kind of the toxicity and the nastiness we've seen in some of these meetings. I used to, years ago when I was going, they were very boring. And now they're quite entertaining, but also kind of a little depressing. So maybe talk about your thoughts about that, and then having the assembly having a relationship with the mayor where it's not so toxic and crazy every time there's a meeting.
Well, like I said, I've been going to the meetings, and one thing I can say is that communication is a two-way street, and I've seen the assembly person, as an assembly person, ask the mayor a question which would be very easy to answer, and he stonewalls it because he doesn't want to answer. So he has to communicate in order to make this happen as well, in order to help this healing. I have noticed that I've heard, and I know this happens in community council, someone gets all fired up and they come to the meeting and they want to bring something forward right then, when the public process is we have a 1 week notice if anything's going to be put forward on our meetings, just so you have a chance to prepare and be ready for moving this forward. And I've heard that the assembly is faced with some of that with the mayor bringing things last minute, that then you're spending the meeting time looking through it instead of having the homework done before. I think there's some ridiculous people, I hate to say this, but they come every meeting just to make chaos. And there's one person in particular that gets hauled out quite a bit, and that's sad because there's people who want to.
He's running for the assembly too.
Yeah, he's running for the assembly too. Yeah. So anyway, that's the forum for people to come and engage with government, and it's too bad it's kind of becoming a mockery in ways.
Yeah, I'll go to you on the relationship with the assembly and the mayor, and kind of this, how that's gone, and moving forward, and maybe improving that.
Well, it's kind of like what I've tried to do with Brave Nation, or Brave Conversations, Brave Nation, trying to pull people together, and it's really just healthy relationships versus unhealthy relationships. I see a lot of the classic, mechanisms that people use, like you said, stonewalling, or projecting things on others that we ourselves are doing. And so I see that happening on both sides, honestly. And I call it toxic tribalism because, one group benefits from being against another group. And if they try to come together, then they're vilified for that. And so I feel like that's why I feel like new blood is going to help that. But also I really make an effort to have healthy relationships in my life. And I always try to be honest and come to the table with honesty. And even if it makes me look bad, I need to do that because that's how we're going to solve this. The problem is out here on the table. It's not in you or in someone else. Most of the time, we can solve this together. We all say we want the same things. And a lot of these forums we've been having, we say we want the same things. But it's going to be interesting to see if we can actually have healthy relationships. And I want to cultivate that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Both very good. You guys seem like they're so nice.
Yeah,
We are nice.
Sometimes the assembly, it's kind of crazy. We're going to go to candidate questions. So basically, each one of you can ask another 2 questions to the other candidate, and there could be a response and then a brief rebuttal. So we'll start with you, Karen. Your first question to Leigh.
And I see you've anticipated.
Yes, of course.
When redistricting for political boundaries, you wrote a letter of support for a map that would put Muldoon with Eagle River, and it said something about you felt more comfortable with your neighbors to the east.
Mm-hmm.
And Eagle River's 10 miles away. There's a mountain range in between.
Mm-hmm.
We felt strongly, and I wrote letters of support, and we passed resolutions that to break the east side apart was gerrymandering, and eventually it was found illegal. Why did you support that change?
Well, gerrymandering is usually called gerrymandering when you don't like it. So I feel like both sides do that. I feel like but anyway, I think looking at that issue, it's a different coming from just a constituent perspective as a representative. I wasn't really considering the whole of my community and gathering that feedback. I was just acting as one person. And so I think I had the right to go ahead and voice my opinion that way. I probably would have considered things differently had I been a representative.
If you want to do a rebuttal,
That's fair.
Karen, if not, you don't have to.
I don't think I need to. I mean, that's valid, and that's one of the reasons that we have community councils to get together and talk about things like that, so we know how our neighbors feel. Okay,
Leigh, you can go now and ask Karen a question.
Yeah, and of course we're both educators, so I have to ask you a couple of those questions. Do you think that Anchorage Public Schools are a great success, and why or why not?
I think that Anchorage Public Schools are doing very well with some very diverse and difficult situations. COVID threw a monkey wrench in a lot of things and has made coming back from that difficult. Kids did not keep up with the schoolwork over Zoom. That was a very difficult format. Having been in the trenches and having taught for 20 years, I could tell you, I taught health for a while, and I would bring kids to the classroom and watch those classroom teachers, and I was in absolute awe of what they were doing. They were creating these communities that kids were kind to people who had learning differences. They were protective of those who were bullied. And so the picture I always saw, and I was at Scenic Park and Cassoon Elementaries and for a while at Wendler, is that overall, we have fantastic teachers who are trying to do a lot with less and less. And the test scores, we can look at those and say the sky is falling, but I think that we are bringing up some pretty amazing children in our Anchorage School District.
Okay, Leigh, rebuttal if you'd like.
Okay, so as far as the test scores go, does that matter to you, or is that?
I think the test scores are false in a lot of ways, because they're losing so much learning time for these testings. The kids are tired of taking them, and a lot of times they're really culturally inappropriate. They are not looking at things that, they're like, you're talking institutional knowledge, but their knowledge from growing up. And I've looked at some of the questions. Some of them, quite frankly, are pretty bizarre. And, even if a kid was pretty smart, sometimes they overthink them. And, so I don't think
is there a better measurement, do you think?
I think the better measurement would be like an interview kind of, where you put together a portfolio of what you've learned. And that's really difficult to manage. But this portfolio that comes at the end. And I can say another thing about education. I think we were doing better with an exit exam. That went away, but there were kids that became more engaged when they knew at the end, if I don't pass that test, I don't get the diploma, I'm going to get a certificate.
Maybe I'll just wait. I wasn't going to ask this, but the Senate, or last year, the legislature passed the Alaska Reads Act. It was unanimous in the Senate. It was just by one vote in the House. And Florida and Mississippi have passed similar acts. So I guess maybe you guys are both educators, and I'll ask about just the reading element. I mean, a lot of data has come out. If a kid doesn't have a grasp on reading by third grade, future predictors of college and income and all these different things. So, as far as the testing goes, I would say reading's you can read or you can't read, right, in the vocabulary. So if you both educators, maybe talk about just the reading.
I think it's really important to have reading be, it's an essential building block for all other learning. So I think we need to prioritize reading in schools for sure.
So, the third grade is that pivotal, I'm no longer learning to read, I'm reading to learn.
Right, yeah,
and
for that.
So, it is super duper important. That sounded so weird. But anyway, I think that our pre-K, universal pre-K is going to do huge things for that. We have parents in our district that are strapped. There's single parent families, two parents working. The kids aren't getting that reading time. And I think that universal pre-K, that is optional. You don't have to do it, but if it's available, I think it's going to bring kids to the table ready to learn.
Okay, let's go to the second question. We'll start with you, Karen, and then we'll go to that, Leigh.
Okay. So we kind of touched on this already, but community councils were formed by the municipality to give every neighborhood council district a direct and continuing means of citizen participation in government and local affairs. Why have you chosen to not participate in community council?
Yeah, well, that's a fair question. I think that they are very important. I think they're one great way to serve the community. I've been involved in other things, and I think that a lot of different ways you can serve your community. And so like I said, I've started a school. I've been involved in all kinds of political initiatives and just serving my community, breaking up fights in the neighborhood, things like that. Having kids over to my house after the earthquake and things like that. So I feel like I've just been doing my part, and I really wasn't looking at this role as something I was really preparing for. It was an opportunity that came up, and I thought, you know what, I think I can bring a different perspective. So I definitely I serve my community, and I feel like a lot of people serve their community in various ways. And thank you for doing it in the community council. Yeah.
And Karen, brief rebuttal if you'd like.
Well, I just if you knew that you were going to run, would you have become more engaged and work on the process?
I honestly, I want to, whether or not I'm going to be in. I was mostly focused on the state issues because my husband ran for state house as well, and so we were kind of putting our efforts there. But the local is very important as well, and I look forward to being more involved.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah.
And then your second question to.
Yeah, and and again, it's my own personal. Wondering about you and where you stand with education. As a health teacher, do you think a minor should be able to access a health procedure like a sex change or abortion without parental consent?
So are you talking to my health students that were kindergarten through sixth?
No, not specific students. I'm just saying as a whole, do you think students should be able to do that?
They need to have parental as a young child, for sure. I am absolutely, positively on board with protecting reproductive rights. I'm absolutely on board with coming around and supporting the LGBTQ community. I had a grandmother contact me about her grandchild, and I'm going to just be very cryptic on it, but it was a very heart-wrenching story about this child growing up, being born as a boy, but growing up completely positive he was a girl. And we could say that somebody fed him that, but she said his dad was very conservative. He was so, you cannot wear that dress outside. They were hiding that he walked around in high heels and all of this stuff. And it got to about third grade, and they decided all they were doing was mentally harming this child. And they made the decision that if he wanted to be a girl, they would let him choose a girl name, and they would let him dress that way. And it was just really interesting to me. She said they went to the classroom, the health teacher. We just would have a lot of conversations with our kids that, about personal safety and all this. So this kid felt very safe with the health teacher. And she brought up to the class that this kid was now going to be whatever girl name they had chosen, and that he was a girl now. And the kids in the class, I guess this was third grade, said, well, duh. It's like they had understood all along that for whatever reason, that's where he was wired. And that would be just cruel to push something else on him. So do I think he should be able to run out and make, changes in his body? No. He's having a discussion with his parents, and that's right for them, and it's none of my business.
Is there a certain age that you think that they should be let in on that decision or not?
Well, I think when they're an adult, 18, if you can go to war or you can...
So you don't think they should be able to make that decision on their own as a child?
No.
Okay.
I don't, I think that's a family issue. And
that if someone came to a counselor or something like that and said, this is who I am, this is my name, but maybe don't tell my parents, what would you say to that?
I think, so if someone went to the counselor at an elementary school and said, this is my name now.
Or a high school, yeah.
Well, you would have to, you would be having a discussion with a parent about that.
Okay.
That's something you wouldn't be hiding from them. You would be wanting their direction on how do you feel about this. And, I think that if the parents were very against it, especially like at elementary age, you probably wouldn't be using the girl name for the boy then, but.
So we'll move on to the next topic.
Yes.
Maybe you guys should have ran for the school board.
I know.
Really big on the edge.
I was curious, so I had to ask.
Well, we're going to go on to the next, we've got some more topics for discussion. We'll go to closing statements.
Sure.
But I want to start with you, Leigh, when talk about homelessness. I've been here almost 20 years, and the homelessness problem visibly is definitely, by all accounts, getting worse. But we have the Sullivan Arena. We stood it up with COVID, then it got closed, and there was a Centennial Park deal, kind of stopgap for the summer. And then we have the Golden Lion. There's been some assembly attempts to buy buildings. The mayor's got a different idea on the navigation center. What are your thoughts on how we solve this problem, which by all accounts are, aren't solved and are getting worse, and it's really affecting our community in a lot of bad ways.
Yeah, and again, the toxic tribalism is contributing to it because whoever came up with the idea, the opposite side does not want that thing to go through. It seems like so we can't really get anywhere with this. But that being said, I think we need to make some gains in this, and I think that I don't agree with necessarily housing first. I think housing is one aspect. There are 3 different reasons that people are homeless. One of them is that they just need a leg up. They do need housing. They need affordable housing. Another is they have drug issues or mental health issues that they need extra help. So we need mental health facilities for them. And there is a growing number of those people that I've heard about. And then the third is chronically homeless, that they actually prefer being homeless. So there's not as much we can do for them, but giving them housing isn't necessarily the answer. So I think that we need to look at each different cause, and we need to have some sort of, that's what the Navigation Center, the idea of it was supposed to be, is to identify the cause and then to point them toward ways that they can get out of it. But I think really we need to make sure that people aren't profiting from perpetuating the problem and not solving the problem. And also that people that are homeless right now, that they're also incentivized to get out instead of staying in their current cycle.
Karen, on the homelessness, like I mentioned, the Sullivan and the Centennial and these hotels and just the problem, and how do we, it seems like it's been going on for not just last couple of years, for decades. It's not a new problem.
Absolutely. And, I could start out with saying that my first real job was at Alaska Psychiatric Institute. And at the time, I worked as a recreational therapist, and at the time there were 200, and it could have been 285, but for sure 265 beds of people who were chronically mentally ill, who mostly lived there. They were in and out. When they left, they would get off their meds, they would go, they would do something that was not appropriate, and they would end up back in. So it was an endless cycle. And that facility is, I've heard, down to 35 residents. And so we are going to need, I really believe behavioral health resources is number one. Someone who, besides the mental illness, behavior, the problem with substance abuse treatment availability here in Alaska. I have a friend who's struggled with a child with problems and was on a list to get her in some place and ended up having to fly her to the lower 48. That's not okay. We should be able to treat our loved ones here in Alaska. That's part of the healing. I believe in housing first. I think if we throw people into conglomerate shelters, they feed off each other, just like in schools. You don't throw an entire room full of special needs children together because they don't learn things from people who are from children who are successful.
I'll say that last year and a half ago, I spent the night at the Sullivan Arena, and I spent 24 hours there almost. And it's just probably my view, the last place you'd want to put someone who wanted to get help or get better. It was a very toxic, kind of horrible situation. So.
But you said that's changed, right?
And
I haven't been back since.
I'm sure it's like
changed.
Any given day may be different, but I don't think so. I think they've made huge changes. They learned a lot from that time you were in there, and there's a bathroom attendant now. They're wanded on the way in, they're signed in. If they get disruptive, they are ushered out. And it was quiet and peaceful and clean. And what I hadn't heard from anyone is that they were actually hiring people for some of the first times they've ever had a job, and they were mopping floors, and I just felt it was well run. But they can't stay there. They need something else.
Next question, I want to talk about the body cameras for the APD officers. The voters approved a couple of years ago funding for these body cameras. It's been a struggle to implement them. There's been some pushback from the union. They want to make sure that the contract is redone, I guess, or amended to have the body camera policy. So I'll start with you, Karen. Do you support the body cameras and for the APD officers, and why do you think in more than 2 years we haven't been able to get APD to have the body cameras?
I'm in support of body cameras, and I'm endorsed by APDEA PAC, and we talked about this issue, and it's whether or not a police officer who's had to discharge a weapon, it's been a violent situation, can have the right to look at that footage before it's put out. And I feel like they should be able to see, what they're worried about is, in a moment of huge stress, you may not remember everything exactly right, and then you present this camera footage and it looks like you were lying. So they've got genuine concerns. The other thing is the storage of the data. They hadn't really thought about how much that would cost, how that would work, who's going to view it. And I'm thinking about in the classroom, I would welcome a camera. And when I said that to the APDA folks, that like something happened, I'd love you to look at the footage. And most of the officers feel that way. They just have to sort through this mess.
Leigh, on the body cameras and
Yeah.
why they haven't been implemented, and do you support them? And
Yeah.
I should have said in the opening, the troopers have them. A lot of big
Sure.
police departments, even smaller police departments, use them. So it's not something that's not being done. It's being done quite
Yeah.
ubiquitously around.
I
the
support
country.
that. I think we need greater transparency and truth in our nation in general. So, they are having issues that we weren't really foreseeing, like the footage being stored on some kind of cloud for 30 years or something. That creates a large cost, and it also creates some legal things. And, they have to do make sure that when you're coming into a situation, you're not exposing someone. Somebody who doesn't have clothes on or whatever, you're not exposing someone. So there's a lot of different ramifications, and I can see why it's taking them a long time. And the cost, we're gonna have to figure out the cost too. That's gonna be an issue.
Last question before we get to the closing statements. I'll start with you, Leigh. For 10 years, Alaska's been losing population. Anchorage, we have the snow plowing problem, this homelessness problem. I should have mentioned last summer, the grass on the park strip was all dead. I've been here almost 20 years, and I love Alaska, but it seems like we're not really. It doesn't feel like it felt when I came here. So I guess what's your vision for Anchorage for the next 10 years? How do we attract people here? How do we get people to come here and stop losing population and make it a city where, ostensibly it's live, work, play is the motto?
Well, one thing is we need to make it business friendly. We need to make sure business people are feeling welcome to invest here, bring revitalization, and new business owners and entrepreneurs are feeling welcome. And a lot of them feel like, there's a lot of red tape that's, it's not easy to get started here. The other thing is taxes. I mean, people are thinking of moving because of the tax situation, and they can find better places in the valley or even out of state. And so, we always talk about how we want to have compassion on people and take care of people, but that doesn't always get translated to, let's not take their money in the form of taxes. Let's lower that. So I just think it's an interesting conversation, but people are weary, and I think I want to bring hope. I want to instill that the government is there as a partner with people, and that actually I believe that the answer is in people, not in government. And so that's who I'm looking to for answers.
Thanks, Karen. Your kind of vision for Anchorage for the next 10 years.
Well, I've been here so long that I've truly seen us crater and come back up. So I'm not in this position right now where I'm going, the sky is falling. I believe in Anchorage too much. When my parents moved here, we were several months after the earthquake, and there was barely evidence of it. So I think Anchorage people, Alaskans in general, when they roll up their sleeves and get to work, they get things done. But we need to keep Anchorage attractive. We need to make sure that we are still investing in our parks, watering our grass. It makes a big thing. We can't allow people to loiter on the street corners and panhandle everybody that's around. It doesn't feel safe to have that happening. We need to foster and support new businesses coming to the area. The live, work, play that you mentioned is exactly right. The people that we are going to attract to Alaska, in my opinion, they say Anchorage is like minutes from Alaska. The Chugach Range is my playground. And I've worked hard to put trails in our area of town that will make it safer. I think when we establish safe routes for walking and biking, that would go a long ways to make Anchorage more attractive. We don't need to keep adding roads that need to be plowed and maintained. We can give people alternative ways of traveling. And I would love to see walkable communities. My mom is 90 and she can't drive anymore. And, a grocery store is too far away. It's too bad when we planned our city that, we didn't make a little store here, or a little diner in this area that would make it, more user friendly or more attractive. But
I want to thank you both for coming on the very collegial here, and I like how this went. So I appreciate you guys both coming on here.
Yeah.
And we'll go to closing statements and reverse order from the beginning. So we'll start with you, Karen. 2-minute closing statement.
Well, I really thank you for the opportunity to do this. I was scared to death about it, but
Really?
I didn't invite you.
it's a tough thing, but like I said, I've been here for the highs and lows of Anchorage. I believe in my city. I had a dad who has influenced me greatly. I'm all about family, and he would always say, "You leave a place better than you found it." And as kids, we would go for walks in Russian Jack Park, and he would make us pick up trash the whole way. And we'd go to a public use cabin, and he'd make us stack wood and go haul wood. And they were very involved in their community council, and that's kind of the model I followed. They were in Russian Jack Community Council area. And so as Tom and I moved around Anchorage, we were in Nunaka Valley for a while. We were in College Gate, and every place that we have been, we have dug in and joined. I was PTA president in Nunaka Valley because I didn't like the playground. It was on asphalt, and I thought my kid was going to be killed. So we got all these grants written and got a new playground in. In College Gate, we advocated for a bike trail that the mushers now use. And up in Scenic Foothills, as I said, we worked on a safe route around the Tudor Muldoon curve. And so I just want to get in there and dig in and make Anchorage better and stop all this swirling around and negativity and get to work.
Thank you so much, Karen. And then Leigh, your closing statement. Thank you.
Well, I grew up in Los Angeles, California, and I grew up in the LA public school system, and so I know what destructive policies can do for a place, and I really feel like there are some signs of that starting to happen in Anchorage, and it concerns me, and I think it concerns a lot of my other neighbors. I love the diversity of our city. I love that I can, in my little cul-de-sac, I can meet, people from all over the world. But they are, a lot of them who've never voted before are concerned about the education of their children. They're concerned about, the safety of their neighborhoods. They're concerned about a lot of different things, and they're actually getting interested in voting for the very first time, into using their voice. And I think that's a really good thing. Even if it feels like it's bad right now, we have a chance to make a shift with 7 new assembly members, and that is a good thing, I think. So I have a lot of hope for Anchorage, and I hope to be part of that solution.
Well, thank you so much, Leigh Sloan and Karen Bronga, District 5, Seat H, East Anchorage. This is the 2-year seat, not the 3-year seat. So we're going to have a lot of new representation in East Anchorage going forward. I want to thank you both for coming on the debate here for your race. Folks, just so you reminder, the ballots go out for all these 7 races on March 14th, and the election concludes on April 4th. Again, I want to thank Leigh Sloan and Karen Bronga, our sponsors, GCI, the IBW Local 1547, and the Alaska Political Report. And stay tuned, we're going to be doing debates for all 7 races this week, and make sure to vote when the ballots go out. Thanks.
Good job, Lou.
We did it.